Hello, everybody. Ryan Gronfin here with the Restaurant Boss and clickBACON. I want to welcome you to this edition of our training where we're going to be looking at the integration between QuickBooks and clickBACON. And what we're going to really focus on today is kind of getting it set up and the important things that you need to have that work really well for you. We're not actually going to go into a QuickBooks account because the most important part of this is going to be the setup. So that's what we're going to cover here today. One of the things that I want to discuss before we dive right in is how unique the integration that we have built. And actually, I can go ahead and stop sharing here to make this a little bit easier before we jump back in here. How unique of an integration we've built with QuickBooks. We've built a two-way integration. Most of the data processors that you'll find, I could even argue potentially that we're the only one that I know of that does it in depth at the level that we do, where we send data to QuickBooks, but we also pull it back. And what that allows you to do is to instantly have visibility into your numbers, right? In the past, we have our POS system, and a lot of people are sold by the POS companies that the POS system is the only dashboard you need. Your POS system, point of sale system, houses incredibly rich sales data and some labor data, but it does not have any of your expense data. It does not have your COGS. They will sell it to you and tell you it has your COGS if you set up your recipes and all of that, but even that's an ideal COGS. That's not actual because you don't enter your purchases into your POS. Especially, you don't enter your rent and your insurance and all your other expenses. So then we bring in QuickBooks. And people believe, well, I've got the full picture in QuickBooks, but you don't. And there's two reasons you don't have the full picture in QuickBooks. One is fixable with some really good ingenuity and some really complicated bookkeeping. One is not fixable. The first challenge with QuickBooks is getting the data into it correctly, which we showed last week, and go back if you need and watch last week's training video where we showed how we push the data differently. We organize the data from your POS and then we make sure that we push it to QuickBooks correctly, taking into account taxes, taking into account tips to be paid, credit cards to be deposited. I already mentioned sales tax, gift cards, right? All that stuff that's not sales. Just yesterday, I was on the phone with a client who does not do bookkeeping with us, who does not use clickBACON because they are old school and they believe that their methods are the best. And I asked him really quickly, I said, hey, how are we doing on sales year to date? Took him about 8 minutes to figure it out in his POS. And then I asked profit questions and he's like, I don't know. He sent me 2 months ago P&L, which is the last P&L he had, which was the July P&L from his bookkeeper. And when we looked at it, their sales are entered into QuickBooks wrong because it includes taxes, it includes gift cards, it includes tips, it includes all this stuff. So the sales were wrong. And then everything else was wrong because of that. The second thing that we do that we help you with that QuickBooks cannot do is cost of goods sold. And I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. QuickBooks has a cost of goods sold section, but everything is divided by total sales. In the restaurant world, that doesn't work because we need to know our food costs. Remember, food cost is food purchases divided by food sales. Beer cost, beer purchases divided by beer sales. There is no setting and no customization that you can do in QuickBooks to allow it to do that for you. However, with all of that said, QuickBooks is a phenomenal bookkeeping tool. It's the industry leader. It's the industry standard, at least in the United States, for small business bookkeeping. It does a lot of things really well, which is why when we started down this road with clickBACON, we decided to integrate with QuickBooks instead of building our own bookkeeping system. QuickBooks does a great job with connecting to your bank. It does a great job with bill pay. It does a great job with invoicing. It does a great job with balance sheet. It does a great job with financial reporting. It's just not good at restaurant-specific KPIs. So when we think about the QuickBooks integration and we think about your POS system, we think about clickBACON, we now have that complete picture, which is why I've shown you all through this video series kind of some of the really cool stuff about clickBACON. I've shown you the POS, and now we're going to show you how to get that integration with QuickBooks. So now clickBACON can create that full financial picture for you, not only on the nitty-gritty financial accounting stuff, but also on the KPIs that matter to restaurant owners. So there's also some other cool things here. Let me get into the app here and show you this, and then we'll show you. Actually, let's go ahead and get set up, and then I might bounce around from my notes a little bit. So one of the first things that I want to show you here is before we actually connect to QuickBooks, is I want to go into, I'm bouncing around in my notes here. I want to go into our chart of accounts. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the sprocket gear, right? The settings. We're going to go to list. We're going to go to accounts. You want to make sure that your chart of accounts in clickBACON closely resembles your chart of accounts from QuickBooks. Now, in many ways, if you're just getting started and you open up your clickBACON account, I would suggest that you actually export the chart of accounts that we give you and use that as the chart of accounts in QuickBooks, because we've built a phenomenal restaurant-specific chart of accounts. And if anyone on this call needs it, we're happy to send that to you in an Excel file that you can use to upload into QuickBooks, into your QuickBooks Online account. But if you're already existing with QuickBooks Online, you want to make sure that our chart of accounts closely resembles yours. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be close. What I mean by it doesn't have to be perfect is maybe in QuickBooks you have 4 or 5 categories for like occupancy. You might have rent, insurance, CAM fees, percentage rent. But in clickBACON, you're like, you know what? We could just blend all those together into rent. That's fine. But what you don't want is to have these 2 completely different chart of accounts. That's going to make the integration process a lot more timely and a lot more difficult. One of the other things that you're going to want to pay close attention to when you're setting up your chart of accounts in clickBACON is that you are setting up your COGS relationships correctly. We've built in this customization where we allow your COGS and your sales accounts to be different, but you have to match a COG to a sales account. So in this case, I'm showing you a very simple example. Food is matched to food, beer is matched to beer, non-alcoholic beverage matched to non-alcoholic beverage. But you'll notice we have this service charge that a lot of people are starting to do in their restaurant, where they might be charging a credit card fee or $1 per transaction, or maybe $1 per to go. So we want that sale to go into this services account, but there's no COGS for it. So this is a great example there. Once you feel, there's a couple other things I want to show you. We call accounts a little bit differently in clickBACON. In QuickBooks, you basically have income accounts, COGS accounts, expense accounts. That's it. On the profit and loss. On the balance sheet, you've got a whole bunch of other stuff. QuickBooks also has other income and other expenses, which we're building into clickBACON, but for now, you could simply make that an expense, other income and other expenses, like you see I've done here. But what we've done is we've broken out our accounts a little different. So sales accounts are the same as income accounts in QuickBooks. COGS accounts in clickBACON are truly your COGS. In QuickBooks, we recommend that you put your labor also into your COGS section as well as your discounts. But you'll notice in clickBACON, we have a COGS section, we have a discount section, and we have a labor section. Then we get into what we call our expenses. Even though these are all technically expenses, I like to categorize them as what type of expense: COG, discount, or labor. Then we have direct operating expenses and what we call non-controllable expenses. So those are the 6 types of accounts that you'll find in clickBACON. Whereas in QuickBooks, you'll only find sales, COGS, and expenses. The difference between what I call a DOE, a direct operating expense, and a non-controllable expense, we could just as easily call DOEs controllable expenses. That's basically what they are. They're direct operating expenses. They're expenses that directly relate to the operation of the business, whereas non-controllables don't necessarily. You'll see things like bank charges, dues and subscriptions, maybe vehicle expenses for an owner, computers, things like that. But in direct operating expenses, you'll see things like smallwares, supplies, right? Paper goods, stuff like that. So again, in QuickBooks, when you run a P&L, it might look a little bit different. I think our P&L is much easier for restaurant operators to understand, but it's important that you understand the differences here. So when you're mapping out your accounts, when you're building your account structure, you can understand those differences. I think the last thing I want to share here is we don't really have a world of assets and liabilities in ClickBACON. I'll show this to you in a second, but we really only focus on your profit and loss statement. Your liabilities, your assets and your liabilities, those will all be tracked in your accounting software, but it's not really part of your day-to-day operation. So we don't display that for you here in ClickBACON in an effort to try to make things a little bit simpler for you. Account numbers, it's important for me to note here when you're building a chart of accounts that we use account numbers to set a priority of order. So you'll notice we're not alphabetical by default. If you don't assign an account number, then we will default to alphabetical, but we like to use account numbers. If you could get your account numbers to match between ClickBACON and between, am I not sharing? I just realized this the whole time I've been talking about this. I have not been sharing my account. I mean, my screen. So let's share my screen right now, and I might have to go back and record this a little bit later. Okay, so back to what I was saying before. I think this is all going to make, am I sharing the correct screen? Okay, I think this is all going to make a lot more sense now that I'm sharing the screen. But everything I was talking about was here as I was going. So what you'll notice here is like 3000, 3001, 3002. Again, we use these account numbers to create an order of how you like to see things. So you'll notice, like, just for fun, I did this earlier. I did 3001.1. You can also use decimals. So sometimes we build a chart of accounts, then a year later, we're like, shoot, I want to add something, but you have two accounts that are right next to each other. That's where decimals come into play. If you can get your chart of account numbers to match in ClickBACON and in QuickBooks, then mapping is going to be that much easier. But if you can't, it's not a big deal. Again, the only thing they're used for is creating an order that you like to see. Let me see. The last thing, is parent accounts. So you'll notice, like here, we don't have a parent. I can go ahead and do something here. Let's go ahead and add an account. So it'll ask you where you want this to be. Well, right now, it's going to be, let's say that we're going to do bottle beer and draft beer. I'm going to delete the account later, but I'm going to do bottle beer where the parent is beer. And I'm going to do 30,001 point. I can't do the same as the other 0.11 just for fun. And then now you'll see bottle beer nested under beer. And so if we wanted to, we could also do draft beer. And again, I'm going to not assign an account just to show you, but it'll default it below it, or it puts 00 there, right? So that's how you nest accounts. I'm going to go ahead and delete these because it's going to make mapping later a little bit more difficult. But that's how you create a parent-child relationship. So that way you can get roll-ups. So a great example would be, in this example, I'm only doing food and beer, but let's say you did food, non-alcoholic beverage, and then you wanted a bar beverage. And then under bar, you would do beer, wine, liquor. So then you can get a beer cost, a wine cost, a liquor cost, but then you can also get a roll-up to your full bar cost, which is really a nice thing. And so again, as far as chart of accounts, I think I've covered everything in my notes I wanted to. I'm going to show you how to set up the integration. The last thing I want to show you, and we're going to get into more details on this next week, is within documents. Actually, we have to connect first. So let's go ahead and do the connection. And then I'll show you something in documents, or I'll probably just talk to you about it in documents that we can do. So to set this up, it's super simple. You just go to Settings, API, connect to QuickBooks, and it's literally going to open up a new window. You're going to log in. In this case, I was already logged in. If you're part of a parent company, it's going to ask for your parent company. And then we have a test account that this is it. You connect to that. You go through some QuickBooks authorizations, and fingers crossed, everything works perfect. There you go. So we are now connected to QuickBooks. That's literally how simple it was. You log in, you saw it in real time. It took 5 seconds to do that. However, there's a couple of important things on this page. We've gone ahead. What we do is we default you to import freeze should be off, I believe, on our default. We put QuickBooks as a priority. So depending on your data in QuickBooks, I like to keep QuickBooks as the priority. But let's say you have an old QuickBooks file you've been using for a while, but you're playing around with clickBACON a little bit and you want to make sure you don't mess anything old up. I would put like today as the freeze date. That basically means that we're not going to do any integrations back and forth with QuickBooks from today to the past, only going forward. So this is a great way for you to get in here, play around, push some stuff, test some stuff without messing up anything old, just in case, so you could feel safe about that. Then usually what we'll do is then we'll turn off the freeze date once we're comfortable. Then we can start pulling data in from older days. But again, this is a great way to make sure that you don't mess anything up in your QuickBooks file. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to leave freeze date off because for today's purposes, we don't need that. This is also a great way if you close out your books. Like some people like to reconcile and close out their books. So maybe the 10th of the month, let's say September is done, reconciled, and closed out. You could then come in here and set 9/30 or 8/1 as the freeze date, 9/30 as the freeze date. And then that way we can't manipulate, we can't change anything in the past. So it just kind of depends how you like to use that. But the most important thing you're going to see here is mapping and then updating. Updating from QuickBooks is only used when you make a major change. So if we change mapping settings or if we add new accounts that go backwards, then you would want to do a manual pull. So sometimes we come in and we change some accounts, we remap some stuff. You could do like a full year manual sync, and then that'll bring everything back to syncing up. But from this moment forward, anything you do going forward will automatically stay in sync. So once you're fully set up, as long as you don't make changes, you never have to click the update button again. Unless you see something that's odd, then that's a reason. The thing we're going to spend the most amount of time on today is this mapping. And we're only going to spend a couple minutes here, but this is the most important thing you can do. So what you'll notice here on the left side, these are your QuickBooks accounts, and you'll see there's a lot of categories of accounts. The only things we're really interested in are income, expenses, and costs of goods sold. And so the first thing I'll do is let's go ahead and open up the income account. And it's going to be as simple as this. We have a food income account. We're going to go to sales and we're going to map it to food. We have a beer income account. We're going to go to sales and we're going to map it to beer. So on and so forth, right? Liquor, wine, whatever you choose to do. We do have an auto match button. I'm not going to hit it today because I wanted to show you how to manually map. But when I was saying earlier, if your account numbers match up, when we auto match, the first thing we do is we look for the same account number. If we have the same account number, we map it automatically. Then we look for words. If we have the exact same spelling and the exact same words, we match that automatically. Where we're not perfect is if you have like COGS in QuickBooks, but in clickBACON you have CGS. It won't map that. Now, we are working on adding AI and some other tools to this that will help with that. But as of now, the auto match button, you should always hit the auto match button the first time, let it do its work, and then you can go back and manually map anything else. One of the things I like to do also is I like to filter by mapped accounts. Again, this is a demo account. Let me actually update the accounts that I just mapped. That's why. And then if I go here, The reason there's going to be, if I go to actually, it's going to show the two that we count. If I go to unmapped, it's going to show hundreds of accounts. That's because this is a test account. But normally, if you've got 50 accounts in QuickBooks, you got 50 accounts in ClickBACON. If you go to unmapped and you see that there's an unmapped expense, just click on it and go ahead and map it. And it's that simple. And then once you're all mapped up, again, normally I would hit save here. We would leave here and we'd be good to go. We'd be syncing back and forth. And so I think that wraps up what I really wanted to show you in today's training, because this is really the most important thing. Other than that, what now happens is you just go about your business. And I'm going to demonstrate document processing for you tomorrow, but we've kind of already demonstrated how the POS integration works. You just go about your business. We pull in your daily sales. You do your classifications for your daily sales. Then we push it to QuickBooks automatically. You upload your documents. You go through the process of, and again, we're going to do a full training on this next week, but you go through your process of looking at bills that we've already done the extraction on for you. And then you just send them to QuickBooks, or they'll automatically go to QuickBooks once they're set up properly. And what I wanted to get at today, and again, I'm not going to train on it, but what I wanted to do or show you or talk about is we have this really unique thing where we can not only send documents that we process, that we do the extraction on to QuickBooks, but let's say there's a document, like let's say there's a handwritten note or something that we can't extract or we don't do anything with. You could just come in here and manually do the work yourself. We've basically mimicked what a bill, what an invoice, what a expense, what a check looks like in QuickBooks. So you could literally just come in here and say, hey, this is a check. You enter the check number, you enter the check date, you go ahead and put the line items that's on the check, you hit send to QuickBooks, and it shows up in QuickBooks. So it's a really slick two-way integration.